simplified Tai Chi form, as they call it. Although we're typically a Wu style school, we practice some of the more standardized forms, such as 24, and in competition we practice the 42 and the Wu style 45 movement forms. So this is called our modern class, and this is the class that we sort of merge the different styles to understand some of the fundamental differences between the styles. So let's run through it once and see if we have any questions. Okay. Off. Preparation. We hold the ball and then we step out. So we have 3 part the horse's mane. Stork flaps wings. Brush knee 3 times. Strum the lute. Repulse the monkey. So we do this 4 times. We hold the ball. Grasp the sparrow's tail left side. (180-degree turn). Grasp the sparrow's tail right side. Turning to single whip. Cloud hands. Back to single whip. Okay. Palm strikes face. Opening to heel kick. 2 punches to the ear. That's to the corner, and then we turn. It's 180 degrees to the opposite corner to a heel kick. And we hook our wrists, downward posture. Golden cockroach stands on 1 leg. We go to the opposite side, set up the hands, downward posture. And we hold the ball. Jade Lady works shuttle. Hold the ball. Jade Lady works shuttle. Insert the needle. Fan through the back. Turn. Parry and punch. Form the fist and punch. And we close. Okay, so that's a typical 24 movement form. Deep breathing, inhale. So although this form's called simplified Tai Chi, it's not so simple to, generate the postures correctly and to be able to go to some of those lower positions. But it is called simplified mainly because it has less postures than the typical long form. So some of the standard postures that we have in some of these modern forms or some of the shorter forms: part the horse's mane, brush knee and push, strum the lute. Those are all standard simple postures or postures drawn from the long form. Stork flaps wings. Then grasp the sparrow's tail is essential because that carries within the 4 movements the ward off, roll back, press, and push. And inside that form, we also have 2 kicks. Most of the long forms have a series of kicks, but in this we just have 2 kicks to at least capture the essence of the balance and the kicking motion. So those have the hand movements that do this, and this uses the heel kick. And then we have the 2 punch to the ear, so that's a pretty standard posture. Then along with that we have insert needle, we have fan through the back, and then we have turn the body, parry, and punch. And then the closing movements would be leopard and tiger springs to mountain. Okay, so that essentially would cover the forms that are inside. Actually, there's 2 more. There's golden cockerel stands on one leg that's tied together with downward posture. So any of you who have studied the long form, you could see the correlation between some of the groupings of the form, right? Downward posture and golden cockerel kind of go hand in hand. Insert needle and fan through the back go hand in hand, okay? So then part the horse's mane, typically we have it in the long form. We also have in the long form sometimes a movement called diagonal flying. A lot of times people question what the difference is. Essentially there's not a whole lot of difference, so the short forms generally eliminate the diagonal flying simply because the movements look so close that it's very hard to distinguish what the difference is. But in application, the diagonal flying might be a little bit more angular, whereas part the horse's mane is essentially lifting and using the shoulder and so forth. But because the simplified forms are practiced more for health reasons or as a health exercise, we're not so focused on the application side of it, although depending on what your objectives are, any one of the forms that you practice can be interpreted and applied as a martial art or has functionality to every movement. Strum the lute, essentially, if we were taking these movements to the martial arts side of it, strum the lute essentially is an on-guard position. So on-guard position is center line, regardless of whether it's Kung Fu, Tai Chi, or any of the other various southern styles. You would have a center line movement. So if I take the center line movement, I bring one foot forward into empty stance, I bring it to the toe empty stance, and we set up our hands. That's an on-guard position. Typical on-guard position protects your center line, also is used to sort of set an upper and lower position. Now we switch, it's like this. So it's just preparation facing an opponent, so you don't want to face an opponent with your hands down here, and you don't want to be out here. So that kind of keeps you in this neutral position so that you can feel comfortable and somewhat confident about facing an opponent. Now when our hands are here, that's just your final position. To get to that position is what makes it effective. So when we move our hand like this or like this, so we can actually get into strum the lute position, like a center line position, from different directions. So if I go like this, that's strum the lute. If I go like this, that's strum the lute. If I'm bringing my hands down, that's strum the lute. If I lift the hands up, that's approaching center line and strumming. It really depends on what you're applying the technique for. But for a lot of us, that just as an exercise, you're not concerned so much about that. But the fact that I bring the idea up that you can approach this position from here or from, say, stork flap swing as you go into a neutral position. It's really a principle in Tai Chi we call sink the elbow and relax the shoulder, right? So when the elbows drop, you also have to relax the shoulders. So the shoulders actually pivot, and that creates a rotary motion that allows you to sink to and find your center line. So there's, numerous advantages when you sink and you pivot, and you can find mechanical advantages in a number of ways, but the mechanical advantage is what makes the movement effective. So by understanding that mechanical advantage, you'll be able to capitalize on a situation based on how your opponent's force is coming towards you. So some of us it may not be real important, but for this particular video, and also as a tutorial, I'd like to just go through a couple of positions using strum the lute and that centerline position, using Eric as a model. So typically it's this space that you're dealing with. So if his hand comes into my space, my hand would come and defend. Now, if it's higher, the hand's in this position. If it's lower, I have this hand. So that's how you protect that area. Actually, we call those gateways or gates. So you have upper gate, middle gate, and lower gate. We call them gates because they're called doors in Chinese. So the upper door, middle door, or lower door. But what happens, if my hand is high like this, then I would drop my elbow. If my hand was down here, and all of a sudden it came, my hand would lift, you see. If my hand was on this side, and I wanted to turn into this, it would be here. Now, if it's lower, then you'd have to actually use a different technique. If my hand was here, and I came to center, then you would see how, the movement is effective. Now, what we're using is not the palm of the hand. We're using our forearm as the interceptor or the place of attachment, because when you're trying to defend yourself against something that's coming at you, that's a larger surface, more surface area, and it covers more space. So that's the main reason why we use that. But the other reason is because of attachment and sensitivity. So that's a whole nother subject when you're talking about that. But this is just basically why your arms would go into a certain position and what surfaces you're engaging in. Now, it's not that you can't use your palm, but the surface area is smaller and you actually become somewhat isolated in your movement. It's better to use your arm totally, because when I speak of the arm, it's not just the forearm, it's also the upper part of your arm. Now, when it comes into this space, it's the forearm. But if it came down to this space, it could be my elbow. So it depends on what you're utilizing to intercept. So anytime you draw like this, if he were to punch in my waist, I could actually just do this and defend myself against that as an action like this. So that just shows you that these actions actually cover a lot of territory, and that territory is really your space. And that space is what you do, you're trying to defend, but when you're doing the form, you're trying to use your body as a reference. So you have to use this space as your reference point. Now, I talk a lot about how these are applied, but one of the discussions was we need to pair off and work some of these movements. Today we probably won't do a lot of pairing off, but at some point we should have a class on pairing off and try to get a feeling of what these are like. If there is an interest, we can do a couple of those. You find a partner and do it, but let's do a couple of more moving before we actually work with a partner. Okay. So brush knee and push, that seems to be a common movement. So the brush knee, this is actually a low block, and it's circling around, and this is your push. That's a pretty standard movement in all the styles, because what are you doing? This is here, this strum the lute, and this movement is all part of a circle. So this actually is a unit. You can change from the strum the loot position, which I call neutral, to a circular movement on a press side, and then followed by a push. So when you combine those two motions, there's your redirecting of a force. It can be a low block, it can be redirecting of force and taking it down. And then you can also get to this point and capture by grabbing the wrist and using one of the pull down movements and supplementing that with a push. So in Tai Chi, we don't actually strike like in some of the other martial arts, simply because it's an exercise to train and learn how to work with your opponent. Instead of hitting your opponent, we learn to touch and feel and push. So going back to that strum the loot position, if I take that strum the loot position and I turn into the flat hand and then the brush, there's your push. So I take this hand, move it aside, and here's the push. Without actually pushing, we just kind of work toward that movement so that we understand how to apply it. Now, I can also do this, and then when I get to this point, I grab and I pull as a function of disrupting my opponent's body. So one of the big advantages of studying something like Tai Chi, or I really focus a lot on integration of your body, which is, I think, one of the most important things about coordination and building the relationship between the right and left sides, is that you can't really do this technique if you block like this and then forget about that hand and strike like that. That's called a broken movement. So movements have to be connected so that you have a synchronization of your body so that you can do this. And then once you have control of a position, if I'm here, if I wanted to turn, I could actually turn into a diagonal flying or a pot the horse's mane, depending on what you're doing. So a lot of movements actually become a setup for your next movement. You see what I mean? So if he comes in, I take the hand. This could be a brush knee, but what if I change it here? And I do a shoulder stroke, which is actually additional movement that comes from one of the other motions that you have in Tai Chi, which is when you lean forward and you lift it like this. So these are all, you could classify them as the weapons of your body. So you use these different sections of your body to either defend or use them as the movements to strike or to neutralize or dissolve the force. So these are terms that we use. Neutralizing is taking a force in and then sort of letting it go to nowhere. Dissolving is the same way. It's just like, when something comes in, it just melts away as if there's nothing to attach to. So that's dissolving energy. So these are, different terms that have been coined throughout the years just to sort of, as metaphors, to explain what these different techniques are. Now, say insert needle. This is a movement that you say, well, what's someone doing that for, right? So the insert part is actually striking down, or like I said before, it's a vertical movement, is part of strum the loot, right? So if I go like this, that's part of, that's part of the upward movement in insert needle, but it's also going to a position. That position is neutral or strum the loot position. Now when I go down, there's a separation and a splitting. So the up and down movement ties the two sides together. So when this goes up, this can go down. When this goes up, this goes down. So it's a vertical movement. You're striking down towards your center line or to your opponent's center line. So what ends up happening is when my hand is here, when it goes up, it goes like this, okay? And it's also sometimes used, like this. So when I insert the needle, I can actually come in like this and go toward the elbow on this side or this side. See? So the action is really a balance, because Tai Chi we always focus on balancing movement, yin and yang. So what goes up must come down, what goes down must come up. So you have this balancing mechanism that keeps the action fluid and consistent. So we go like this, actually, when we're in a position like this area of the hand is called the tiger's mouth. So sometimes you see the hands like this, or you're like this, or like this. You don't want to be striking like this, but when you're capturing or you're moving, you want your hands to be in position of advantage to capture. So when I go like this, my hand can actually go like this. So I can use this as the device. But if I do this, it's just the hand. If I do this, it allows me to turn and grab, you see. So if I do this and I turn like this, that sets me up for this, you see. So then I can elbow, or I can just hold this position and use my elbow in this direction. So there's so many things that you can adapt and modify to based on what you've learned through your movements. So when we go down and we come up and we open and we do this, all of those transitions are functional. And to the level of functionality those minute movements can be is really relative to the skill level of the practitioner. So, that kind of gives you an idea of, something as simple as the simplified form has a lot of movements in it. Now let's do the grasp the sparrow's tail on the right side together, the Yang style one. So we start off and hold the ball. We step out and go into the archery stance. And here's the ward off. So this is lifting like this. Now we change the hand and sit back. So this is diverting. So what's diverting? You're going to pull down or you're going to send something that way. So that's the idea. The hands have to be in line. Then you pull it down, or you pull down like this. So you can pull down in a form like this. Then the hands change. So we pull down, the hands change here. Then you come to here. You press. Then you separate the hands in the parallel position, bring it down. So the hands do this, and then you come over the top. So this becomes the pull down or neutralization of the force. Then you give it back. So inside this grasp of sparrow's tail are 4 movements, and they're considered 4 energies. So you have ward off. So everybody try ward off from hold the ball. And then you ward off. Then you change the hand position, turn the inside hand up, and you roll back. You bring it down past you, and then you turn, and then adjust, and then press forward. Now when you press forward, you have this. And then you separate the hands, and then you're dropping the elbows and bring it down in front of the body, and then you come up along the body, and then you sort of go over the top, and that would be your push, okay? So it has like a wave in the movement. It's like you're waving, creating a wave like the ocean, like water. A wave is like an eddy, like in the ocean where it crashes and it waves. That's a disruptive type of energy, where you're trying to move your opponent so that it's no longer stable. So that's built into the movement of form. So anyone that doesn't think form is valuable, this is the vehicle to practice your movements and then recreate some of the different energies that they may talk about. So that's that's one of the training tools of a form. So you take form, you have your postures, you have your transitions, you have your final position. All of that has to be brought into your subconscious. It has to become conditioned reflex action for it to be actually applicable. Because if it's not in a state of reflex action, you have to think about it. Actually, it's too slow. So the thinking stage happens when you're learning and you're practicing with a partner. So you have to set up scenarios. You imagine what this movement is for, and then you practice with your partner. And it takes many years actually to become pretty proficient at this stuff. So it's really up to you to, if you have an interest, to dissect the form and understand what the principles are, within the form, and also the type of movement that creates certain energies. You have, dozens of energies that you can classify, but basically in Tai Chi we talk about really 8 energies: the ward off, roll back, press, and push, which we just did in grasp the sparrow's tail. Then you have your corner movements. You have the pull down, the plucking. Okay, the separating hands, which is when you split. And you have 2 short movements that are the close movements. You have your elbow and your shoulder. So, just keeping it simple, it's just those 8 movements. and then you combine it into the 5 directions. You have forward, backward. So you have forward, you have backward, and you have right and left. And then what you have in the middle between those 4 directions is center. So you have forward, backward, right, left, center. And center, we call it central equilibrium. That's your balance point. And the balance point is, it varies depending on your center of mass within the posture. So the center of mass in every posture is different. Now as you progress and you find your own center of mass, your objective working with an opponent is find your opponent's center of mass. And finding that center of mass becomes skillful in a sense that you become aware of where your opponent is moving based on your feeling of transition, whether the right and left sides are moving a certain way, or if there's stiffness, or sort of what do we call double weighted, when the person is stuck. And that double weighted position is when there's using strength that's, not, it's even but not really fluid to create the, what we would call passive active motion or double weightedness. These are terms that have, has to be understood as you, in your training to evolve into that level of understanding. It's really where your center is and where your body weight is over your feet. And when you can control your center of mass and differentiate between the solid and empty, it's called, then you become agile on your feet. Double weighted typically, and this is the most basic thing, is when you're standing like this. Both feet are 50-50, and if you experiment on your own, and anyone that views this, stand with your feet like this, and then you say which way you're going to go. Actually, you can't move either way. Until you move a little bit of weight one way, you can't move the other way. So that's the idea in what we're doing in our leg work and shifting and so forth. So that's, I guess that's, a lot of information basically for the few postures we went through. But if you want to work with a partner and just kind of find your center, you can do that. We do that actually in pushing hands in some of our drills. So if we have time, you can try that. Just find someone about your size, establish your center line, and the simplest way to do this is if you find your partner, all you do is you have the square position, and we just find our center like this, okay? Now, if we shift and find one leg and move forward, then we cross our hands. So that's the strum the lute position. So we just switch, you can cross this way, or you can just go to the outside where one practice is this, see? And this will lead to, some of the other drills, which if I did this is strum the lute. You really should be attaching like this. So let's just flip. So that's a circle going one way, a circle going the other way, okay? Now, we can go like this, that's one way, and then if I turn it to this, there's your push, okay? Then we sit back and he pushes. So you just get the experience of moving from one position. Now this is very simple, but yet you're engaging with someone where you're trying to develop a soft, gentle motion, but transitional. Between this and this is a very small movement. You see, I went from here to here. I didn't go from here to here. I went from here to here. So once you have that action, then once you're in this position, then you can turn. That's how you would. So Nan wanted to see that. But once you attach like this, I can push him like this if I change to this. So if I did that, he would actually have to sink down and then come around to the other side. So that is what is ended up happening. So if he came and pushed, I'd go like this, and I could redirect it like this, or push, and I would come back to this side. So that's what you're essentially doing, and that's just a simple movement as strum the lute. This one actually comes together. This one comes in the same direction. you see. So that's just two simple circles based on this center line. You know, why would we do this? The reason why we would do this is because just like this, they're opposing, right? So if he threw a punch and I go like this, I'm like this. But his elbow is here, you see. So that would be a break or like this. See? So that's crossing and closing. So your hands are like this. Simple motion carries a lot of different, you know, information and techniques. So if you want to, you can actually just try a couple of those before we end class, because we have about 5 minutes and you can just play around with that. It doesn't have to be very physical. It just has to be working the strategy of a technique. What's most important about technique is actually position, alignment of the body. So, yeah. And, you know, for newer people, you know, when you first see this stuff and you don't know the form, it's very hard for you to replicate these motions because, you know, the form is essentially where you develop your coordination, your positioning, and your experience with finding those positions. You take it out of the context of the form, and in many ways you have to relearn it. So, you know, that's the process, but it's not 100% necessary to be engaged in the application side, but it does help you develop a better understanding. So, you know, one of the principles they have, and it's stated in different ways, but they say the soft overcomes the hard. So how does that happen? How can something soft overcome hard? Well, soft overcoming hard has to do with how you would deal with forces as they come. You never want to meet force with force because the strong will always win. But if you use soft to overcome the hard, then you can actually redirect it and find the weakness within that hardness. So that, you know, it's a strategy, but it's really something that you have to think about in order to understand how softness or slowness can overcome, you know, those opposing forces. You know, how does slow beat the fast or the soft overcome the hard? That's something as a student or a practitioner is for you to, you know, analyze and begin to understand. So hopefully you got something out of this, and we'll resume next time I see you. Okay, thanks. We're going to sign out. It's something that we've been doing. It's streaming. Lucien's working the video side of it, but he'll put it on the different social media. It's on right now. It's yeah, and it's going to be on our website. So, or it's on it now. So we have this ability to stream live, and we can also use the different social media platforms to get some of this information out. If you have an interest, email us, go to our constant contact, Facebook, all the venues we try to get to be connected. Okay. Okay, signing out for tonight.